Welcome to Parenting Successful Teens, the podcast that cuts through the overwhelm and stress of this phase and offers parents simple, practical, cognitive, science-based strategies for keeping their teens on track. Join Master Coach and real-life mom, Allie Irwin, to talk about real teens, real problems, and the skills it takes to raise successful adults.
I am very afraid of spiders. When I was a little kid, I have 3 older brothers, and the youngest one is 9 years older than I am. And so I don't think he was super thrilled about having a little sister in the first place. And he was really not thrilled about babysitting his little sister. And so one of the things that he used to tell me when my parents would leave us home alone is all the scary spider stories. He told me that some spiders spit poison up to 10 feet away, so you don't even have to be close to them in order for them to hurt you. And I would see a little spider. I grew up on a farm. We had plenty of spiders. And I would say, Brian, is that the kind of spider that spits poison? And then he would just scratch his chin and say, I don't know. I can't remember which ones are the, most dangerous ones. You should probably just stay away from all of them. And so I grew up with this fear, this irrational fear of spiders, except for it is rational. If you're a little kid and you believe your older brother that spiders are dangerous. That thought that spiders are dangerous and unpredictable went into my brain as a child. And now I have that response automatically. I don't consciously think anymore, spiders are dangerous. Let me ask my brother if this is one of the dangerous ones. Like, my body just reacts to that situation automatically. And that unconscious, when I say automatically and that I'm not thinking about it, that's what unconscious means, right? Like, we're not consciously thinking about something. Our unconscious mind is not some big mystery. It's just the thoughts that we have automatically. That unconscious pattern of thinking is what I call the crockpot of shitty thoughts. Okay? Crockpots, if you remember them. It's like an Instapot, but instead of fast, it's really slow. Crockpots are the set it and forget it kitchen appliance. Okay, you just put a bunch of ingredients in there in the morning and you turn it on low and it cooks all day and voila, there's dinner. You don't have to think about it. It's set it and forget it. And our unconscious minds, the things that we took in as children, are the exact same thing. Our unconscious minds, stuff got put in there as a child, or stuff can get put in like throughout our lifetime when we're under highly stressful situations. And then our reaction to similar triggers, so like the stuff gets put in as a child and it cooks for decades as you're growing up, and you forget even what got put in there, and then a current situation triggers it, and you have an automatic reaction that you can't logic your way out of, okay? I want you to think of that crockpot of shitty thoughts. Those are the thoughts that got put in there, and they've just been cooking for decades, and you're not even aware that those thoughts are in there anymore, okay? It's just become part of the stew that is you. So what does my fear of spiders have to do with getting triggered as a parent? Let me give you a couple of examples. Say your daughter calls and she's upset, and you do your best to help her, but the phone call ends with you feeling like you completely blew it. You're kicking yourself and thinking of all the things that you wished you had said or not said. Like, I said too much. I gave her too many options and it was confusing. That wasn't helpful. It just made her feel worse. She probably won't call me again when she needs help next time. She's already feeling disappointed, and then I just go and point out her part in it. Or I go and point out that that friend is unreliable. Why did she expect her friend to be any different this time? Why didn't I just listen? Or why do I always say the wrong thing? Okay, if your brain spins out like that, oftentimes there's a crockpot thought in your mind about how you always say the wrong thing, or you never know what to do or what to say when she calls. Or you're worried about not making a mistake. Or the flip side of that exact same thought is like you're worried about getting it right. You put a lot of pressure on yourself to get it right when your kids reach out to you. Oftentimes, those thoughts that you've had over and over and over, if you recognize that that's a familiar place your brain goes, those thoughts are really connected back. They're triggering something that goes all the way back to something that happened when you were really little. And you don't even have to know what it was. It could be something small, like you said something and then the teacher embarrassed you and the class laughed, and now you're really sensitive about saying the wrong thing. Or maybe you said something and your friend got mad at you, and you worry about losing relationships because you had this situation happen when you were little, with a friend. The idea is that those thoughts got installed when you were really little. They got put into the crockpot of your unconscious mind when you were really little. And now they just run on autopilot, and you're not even aware that your response is tied back to this thought pattern that you have. And it isn't really just about the situation that you're in right now. It's about how the situation triggers all of this thought pattern that's been happening for decades. So let me give you a couple of other examples. Maybe you're I'm laughing because in my notes here, I'm like, hey, half the time those conversations go just fine. Like all your kid remembers from the conversation is that they reached out to you and you were there. And you're having this whole reaction about how it went terribly. And your kid is just thinking like, hey, I reached out to my mom and it like really didn't even matter what you said. What matters is that you were there. Okay, that's a key indicator that your response isn't really tied to the conversation. That feeling of pressure you have that you have to say the right thing isn't really tied to this conversation. It's tied to old thought patterns that you have. Another example I have is maybe you're a middle child and felt like you were always competing for attention, or maybe you're from a large family, or you had, your parents were really busy and you felt like you were always competing for attention. And now when your kids are ignoring you, you get triggered more easily because of those old feelings about being invisible, about nobody seeing you or nobody appreciating you, all the things that you are trying to do for them. Okay, the reason those feel so triggering is because you have these old thought patterns, you have these old crockpot thoughts. Or maybe when you were little, your mom had a headache one day and asked you to stop making all that racket. Maybe you were singing and she's like, stop that racket. And your little 4-year-old voice told you that when you're just playing and being yourself and singing, that it's a problem for other people. Like it could even conflate like your happiness and just being exuberant is a problem somehow for other people. And so now, like, that felt so terrible to you. Now you're super sensitive about saying the wrong thing to your kids because you don't want them to feel bad for just being their exuberant selves. Like you're worried you're going to say the wrong thing and shut them down the way that you felt like you were shut down. Okay? And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, there's a great podcast about how making mistakes as a parent is actually a good thing because you can go back and repair the mistakes. And to, fracture a relationship and then repair the fracture actually makes the relationship stronger. And so making mistakes isn't a problem as a parent. But if you're overly concerned about how you could say like one wrong thing and shut them down, that's a crockpot thought. That thought has most likely been cooking in your brain for decades. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do when we notice that we're having that kind of disproportionate reaction? And by disproportionate, I just mean that your response is way bigger than the situation warrants. And the first thing that you do is something to soothe your nervous system. We want to get you out of fight or flight. And it can be as easy as just taking some long, slow exhale breaths. So any breath where your exhale is twice as long as your inhale. So like if you inhale for 2, you exhale for 4. You inhale for 3, exhale for 6. It doesn't matter. You just want the exhale to be twice as long as the inhale. And you can do that in situations without the other person even noticing what you're doing. It isn't like they have to be big. It can just be something to get you out of fight or flight. And then you'll have more access. Once you've calmed down, then you'll have more access to your logic brain. And you can talk to yourself and say, the situation isn't that big of a deal. All she needs is for me to be there. Or, all he needs is me to remind him that he can do it, or ask him some good questions. Like, I can apologize. Like, all of those logic-y thoughts will be more available to you once you've gotten yourself out of fight or flight. Over time, those thoughts, the more that we recognize them as Crockpot thoughts, those thoughts will have less power over us. It's kind of like we are bringing them out of our unconscious into our conscious mind. And there we can see them for what they are. Like, we're not a child anymore. Like, when I was a child, I did need people around me to protect me from scary things. But I'm an adult now, and now I can take care of the situations myself. But when we're having those Crockpot thoughts, we're way back in our childhood selves that couldn't protect ourselves, that was afraid, if our parents left, that they were never going to come back. And all of those fears, if you're an empty nester this fall and you've got Crockpot thoughts about fear of abandonment or being left behind or having not done a good enough job before you send your child out, like, all that stuff's going to come up. And to be able to just see it for what it is, this is just some old programming, some thoughts that got tossed in my Crockpot. I set it and forget it for decades, and now it's running the show, and it doesn't need to. And the more that we do this, the more we can teach our kids about their own Crockpot thoughts. We might first have to teach them what a Crockpot is. But, if you've got teenagers, they've already got their own Crockpot of thoughts of things that happened, of the time that their first grade teacher yelled at them and embarrassed them in the classroom. Or they couldn't figure out who to play with on the playground and they felt alone and like they didn't have any friends. Like, they already have their Crockpot thoughts. And so this is what I love about you moms so much, is the more that you can pick up on and heal your own Crockpot thoughts, the more you can role model for your kids what to do when they're having their own. And I really like this analogy because unconscious mind sounds so terrible and unknowable, whereas a Crockpot thought that just got put in there and has been cooking for years, like, somehow that seems so much less intimidating to me. So give this a try. As I said, if you need help with this, if you're in situations where you keep getting triggered and you can't figure out what's going on and you would like it to be different, absolutely reach out to me. I do free consults and we'll talk about what's going on, and I'll help you see your patterns, and you'll have new information about how your own self works. Hey, on a happy note, I was telling my mom about this episode and, about the situation where Brian used to tell me that spiders spit poison. And she reminded me that my other brother, Neil, was great at killing spiders for me. And that was like a little thing for us, that he would, if I saw a spider, he would come and kill it for me. And I just think that's so sweet. So I hope this was helpful, and I will talk to you next week. Hey, if you enjoyed today's show and you want even more support and a shot of fresh inspiration in your email box each week, you have to get on my list. Sign up to receive my free guide on how to stop second-guessing yourself as a mom. There are so many decisions to make as a mom, and this guide will help you to make decisions and just move on. No more waking up 3 a.m. wondering if you made the wrong decision. This guide is so good. Even my non-mom clients are raving about it. So sign up today, and I will see you next week.